Recording in progress. Hi, Kate Sampson.
Hi, Michelle Magner.
Thanks for joining me today on the podcast.
Yeah, it's a privilege.
I am really excited for this topic that we're going to talk about, your work, your business, because what I recently learned is that my number one podcast episode that was listened to last year was what if you are struggling with your own health issues as a caregiver.
Oh, wow.
So I think this is really timely. So why don't we just start by you introducing yourself and your background, and then giving us an idea of what it is that you do.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I am Kate Sampson. I am the owner and founder of a private practice called Quell Health. Quell, that's what everyone always asks. Kate, what does that mean? Quell means source. It's a German word for source. And I named my business Quell Health for two reasons. One is that my approach to healing and to helping people heal is to look at the source of what's making them unwell, the source of their dis-ease. The other piece of it is that in doing that, part of the function of my practice is to educate my clients so that they can then be the source of their own healing. So that it's a little different than going into a doctor's office, getting a diagnosis, getting a medication prescription and moving on. That's fine. And there's a place for that. But I want to take people who are interested in learning about what's actually going on in the body and wanting to have some role in knowing that they can be in their own driver's seat a little bit to change it. So that's Quell. That's why we named it Quell Health. My background. So about 7 years ago is when I left the teacher training profession. I'd been a teacher trainer and decided to stay home with my then 1-year-old daughter because she was having myriad of issues with her own health as an infant. So she was about 14 months old and it was just kind of baffling to doctors. So she had the quote unquote typical baby stuff like eczema on her skin, but it wasn't just little patches. It was head to toe all over the body. She had chronic diarrhea, different gastritis. She had 50 plus food allergies and sensitivities. And so I made the decision with my husband that I was going to leave my full-time job and to stay home and to try to help my daughter heal. I was really going to commit myself to doing, all the things, cooking a lot, making things from scratch, and it's a full-time job sometimes. So that was my beginning why. And I didn't know at the time that this was going to lead to me opening my own practice, trying to help people do the same thing. But that was the beginning of it. Well, in that same time, I just became a relentless, obsessive researcher, like any mom does. Like we go to the internet first. You're like, I want to find out this answer. So that was where it began. And then before I knew it, I was doing certifications and on webinars and in conferences and traveling places to learn about gut health. And, that was the beginning. And then I got sick. And I don't want to say I just got sick overnight. This was something that was building in me. I didn't realize it. But I started to have a lot of mystery symptoms of my own. So at the time I was about 33, 34 years old. And, my hair was falling out. I had heart palpitations. I went through a whole battery of EKG, EEG, all these tests because my heart would just not stop racing.
Wow.
My moods were off. My hormones were off. And I would just fall asleep in the middle of the day. So it kind of felt like narcoleptic, like I could just fall asleep. And so a lot of chronic fatigue in there. My thyroid numbers were off. And, I went to my endocrinologist and who was a very well-meaning individual. And he said, "Okay, this is easy. All you need is about a 5 milligram tablet of Synthroid." And I said, "Okay." I said, "For how long?" He said, "Forever." And I said, "Thank you, but I'm going to do it a different way." And that was it. And so I decided at that point that I was going to figure out why my body was reacting in this way. And fast forward now 7 years, there were a lot of things that happened in our family at that time, different businesses, et cetera. And in 2020, early 2020, after in August of 2020, I should say, I made the decision to open my own practice. So 2020 afforded me some time to do extra certifications, and I started teaching. And when I was teaching this to a class, I had about 12 people in my class. People started to ask, can you work with me individually? And I said, yeah, of course I can. And that was really what I call like the God wink of like, it's time to do this, Kate, it's time to go. So December 1st is my 2-year anniversary actually of having Quell Health. And
happy anniversary.
Thank you. And I've been able to serve and work with hundreds of people. Hundreds, over 210, I think is the number I just looked.
Oh my gosh.
It has been a great privilege, and I just love what I get to do. So my focus is people with chronic and autoimmune like conditions. So not the, oh man, I have a cold and I have a headache and it's an acute thing. This is people who have lagging, lasting, nagging symptoms that won't go away. Those are the people I like to work with the most.
It seems like it would be really overwhelming because and confusing, because I think for so many of us that are walking around, we attribute a lot of things to our age, like, oh, I'm just getting older, or I'm just feeling run down, or we attribute a lot of things to our current circumstances, situations. And I think there's so many people that have these bigger undercurrent health issues that they are struggling to even really get diagnosed or identify what's going on. So what is like a first step
that I would take with somebody, or
yes, yeah.
Okay. So the first step is always to ask a lot of questions. So when people come or they find me, I will always do a phone call together. So it's about 30 minutes where I ask a lot of questions, and the questions stem all the way into your childhood. So did you have mononucleosis as a child or even as a young adult? That's a question I ask, because if you know you had mono as a young child or as a young adult or even as an adult, then I know for a fact that you have the Epstein-Barr virus in your body. Why does that matter? That matters because unfortunately, Epstein-Barr virus, there's many, many varieties of it. And it is the reason why people, for example, have thyroid issues. It is the beginning. It is a virus that has grown and has strengthened. So it goes through stages, okay? Just like cancer does, okay? So I would ask a lot of questions and to try to get a little sense of what have you had, what have you gone through, what have you tried, what are your symptoms? Are you someone who's dealt with sinus infections in your life? Have you had ear infections? Those answers tell me a story of a pathogen load in your body. And when I can understand what kind of pathogen load, so pathogen is just a fancy word for viruses and bacteria, then I can get a good sense of where we need to begin. And so it takes the overwhelm out for people, because dis-ease, there's an equation that I like to use, and it is pathogens plus toxicity. Okay. So there's an imbalance in the body in some way. So body symptoms, when we go to a doctor and we say, hey, doc, golly, I just have this ringing in my ears and it will not go away. Well, ringing in the ears is the body's way of communicating to you that something is off. So instead of just taking something to make it go away, we're just making we're basically cutting off communication. Now we want the ringing in the ear to go away, no, of course.
Right.
But I approach it differently in that we want to not just alleviate the symptom of the ringing in the ears, but we actually want to get at, why is the ringing happening in the first place?
It's like root cause analysis.
Exactly. So that's, it's not that complicated. It's really some form of that same equation across the board. Pathogens, toxicity, disease. And so every individual has a little something different. We all have something different inside. We all have a different mixture of heavy metals. We all have a different mixture of different pesticides and herbicides in the body from fruit and vegetables we've eaten that are, been sprayed, et cetera. We all have it. No one gets a break on this. We all do. So that's where we begin. And then I fact find, and then I would set up basically a protocol for you in order to heal, depending on what your goals are, what your timeline is, and then we go from there.
So are the protocols tied towards more or different medications, or like environmental? Because obviously we talked a little bit about childhood related things that could have maybe happened, but is our environment now important?
Very much so. So the protocols are a mixture of nutritional changes, environmental changes. So looking at your inputs, so what toxins are in your environment, everything from what kind of laundry detergent do you use to what do you put on your hair. Sometimes those things matter. Okay, they actually matter very much. But yes, we'll look at those pieces. But then we also have to look at the stress levels in your life. Okay. We talk about hormones. Hormone imbalance is, again, a way the body is trying to communicate something to us. Okay. So it is for protocols, depending on if you're a person who it's 100% physical, it would look one way. And if it is somewhat physical, but it's also behavioral. So I work with a lot of people who, will say things like, Kate, no matter what I do, I just can't fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And there's a behavior there that we need to help begin to change, because the behavior is what's actually keeping them from getting well. So let's use the weight. The weight is the greatest example. No matter what I do, Kate, I can never lose weight.
Right.
Well, that just tells me that what you've done thus far isn't the right protocol for you. Okay, it's not sustainable, because that's not true. Okay, that's not true. We were created perfectly to heal. That's why we scab when we get a cut, right? The body is intended and designed to heal. We have to, and what I help with is to help design an environment. So the protocol is the environment for healing. And for some people, they may need to look at the toxicity in their home. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's not just what you're eating, it's environmental things in your lived environment.
So really, we're all so uniquely different that if let's say my good friend tried a certain diet change and it really worked really well for them, what I'm hearing is that we're looking at more of a lifestyle, and we're looking at longevity and how to be healthy. And it's not like a fad or a quick fix potentially. And what worked for someone else isn't necessarily going to work for me.
That's right. So that's true and not true entirely. So let's go back to your initial kind of your question, or, you said about the most popular episode, which is what happens when the caregiver isn't feeling well. Okay?
Right.
What is so normal and what we all do when we're under stress, when we're caretaking, is that we often look to food to cope. Okay. And we don't typically look to leafy green salads. Most of us don't, at least. Okay.
I want some real comfort food. Hand me the kale.
Exactly. Like, man, I cannot wait to have my green juice. Most of us don't really crave those things. we don't associate comfort with those.
Right.
But what happens then is that what we do associate are things like macaroni and cheese, or a great cheeseburger, or some lasagna, or something like that. Okay. And instead of realizing that I never categorize foods as good or bad, but depending upon what you have going on in your body, it may not be good for you to be eating a lot of cheese. It might be just fine for me to be eating some cheese. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean cheese is inherently good or bad, but for your particular condition going on, cheese is not favorable for you, for example.
Right.
But when we're caretakers and we're just looking for comfort, nearly every food that we look to is either covered in cheese, baked with cheese, or, comes in a lasagna roll dish with, so
Right.
it's
Yeah.
very, very hard to eat a diet that is quote unquote anti-inflammatory or that is disease preventing when we are truly just trying to survive,
Right.
because our gas tanks can only be so full. And when we give and we give and we give, oftentimes we end up just running through somewhere quick to pick something up because I'm on the go, or I'm tired at the end of the day of caregiving. I just don't really feel like cooking, so I'm going to throw frozen pizza in or whatnot.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes. That
So
resonates with me.
exactly. Now, all of
Yeah,
us do,
right.
right? All of us. So what happens though is that there are foods that when we eat them with particular low grade viral conditions, they continue to feed that virus. Okay.
Hmm.
And so that can make us sicker. It can give us additional symptoms. And stress is a huge feeder of dis-ease.
Wow.
So that's the double whammy of the caregiver, is that you're trying to do the best you can, but most of us don't take a lot of time to meal prep for ourselves. We're just trying to take care of everybody else, and then I'll eat something when I have a minute. When the best advice I can give caregivers is to take 1 or 2 hours out of your weekend and prepare yourself either a big batch of soup or meal prep 4 or 5 different lunches, so you just have something that you can turn to healthy. Because the difference in what's going to happen mentally for you when you've had a hard day and you feel stressed and you come home and you choose to feed yourself something nutritious versus then feeling even worse about yourself because you just feel gross about what you ate.
Right.
That matters. That matters. And it's not as hard as it can feel when we're in the midst of it, but we have to take a step out and do some planning. And a lot of what I do with my clients, Michelle, is that I help them step out of their life a little bit, and all the excuses that we have, they're valid.
Right.
Why we can't do something, and help them reevaluate, reprioritize, and rearrange so that we put them at the center of their healing despite what's happening in their life. And that's just advice for all of us.
Right. No, that's amazing. And that's like an immediate great takeaway for people, because you do end up investing the time one way or another. And it's really actually totally exhausting to be hard on yourself and down on yourself because you aren't taking care of yourself. And so then you're dissatisfied with that. So either you're
a hamster wheel. It's a cycle. It's
right. Yes. This like shame spiral. Yeah.
That's right. So it's, and then the irony is this, is that we actually gain back time in the week. We gain back time because you're not cooking 3 meals that week, or you've already you get back, you gain back time. Yes, you had to give an hour or 2 on the weekend, but you actually get that and then some back.
You just blew my mind. Because I cook and I do prep, but I have never thought of it in those terms, that investing that time in myself on the weekend actually ends up saving me time on the weekdays when I
know, right?
I have the band meeting. Like, it's like you sort of know it, but you just unlocked that for me.
Good. And when you do it the first time, you're going to be like, whoa, why have I not been doing this before?
Right.
But it's like, working out muscles that you haven't used in a long time.
Yes.
There's a little bit of muscle memory we have to get back to because you're going to be a little sore. Yeah. The first 1 or 2 or 3 times you prep something, it's going to take you longer than it would take the 4th or 5th time. So you're going to say to yourself, I don't have 2 hours. Well, I've got news for you. The second time you do it, it'll take you an hour 45. And the third time you do it, you'll really figure out how to do it better. And it'll take you an hour and a half. And then by the fourth time you do it, you're like, I got this locked. It's done. It's done in an hour.
Yeah. You have a
So-
system. You start to like massage your
Exactly.
systems and figure it out and what works best. And
Exactly. And hey, my kids don't like this. I'm not even going to bother with that. I'm not going to make enough for them. I'll only, you figure it out just like anything in life. But it takes, here's another nugget. It takes the amount of decisions, especially that caretakers have to make during the day.
Mhm.
One of the primary things that we spend our energy on during the day thinking about is food. What am I going to eat next?
Yes.
What am I going to make for lunch? What am I going to make for dinner? What am I going to make for family? That is decision fatigue.
Yes.
And when we are fatigued by deciding things that really ultimately don't matter that much, we just need something in there because we're hungry. And that's why we end up just running through a drive-through quick because you're like, I don't even care what I eat. I'm just hungry.
Right.
When we take the decision fatigue out of the week, it's already decided. It's like I planned my meals, I've prepped them. I just have to go open my fridge, take the Tupperware container out and warm it.
Yeah.
You know how much energy you save in a day?
I'm calculating it now.
It's
It's a
you
lot.
save so much time
Yeah.
because you're like, well, what should I make this chicken or should I bake this or you don't even realize because it's so subconscious,
Yes.
especially for females.
Yes.
It's like, what are we taking care of our kids? It's like all we think about in the midst of the little tiny spaces of our day.
Yeah. And I mean, let's face it, when you see the commercials for refrigerators, it's so beautiful when you have prepped containers of colorful foods in your fridge. I
Yeah.
almost am envisioning opening it up and seeing all the different colors and just being actually excited by that.
Yes, exactly. And you're motivated. You're like, oh, wow, I can see the green cucumbers and the red bell peppers and the orange carrots. And
Mhm.
I don't even need to have a full meal, but it's done. And so then I can grab those to munch on those with a little bit of hummus or a guacamole. And I don't have to turn to my cupboard and eat a bag of chips
Right.
because there's nothing else.
Right. And even that seems like it would work in the car.
Yeah,
Grabbing
absolutely.
stuff for the car.
I tell clients to re-embrace their toddler self. So I'm a mother.
I love that.
I am a mother of small children.
Yeah.
And I have a toddler. And in order for her to be able to independently get her own snacks, I have to prep them for her because I'm not going to let her pull a chair out and climb up in my fridge and like start pulling things out because you know how that's going to end. It's going to end on the floor. So I have to prep small little baggies at her level in the fridge that she can open the fridge and pull them out.
Yeah.
And it's been glorious since I learned to do this because now instead of saying, hey, mommy, can you get me a snack? And I'm in the middle of something, whatnot. Hey, mommy, can I have a snack? Yeah, honey, it's in there. Is there any? Oh, yeah, there are. And she can go in there and she feels very empowered. She gets her own snacks and she goes on her way. It's the same thing. There is no friction point there between mother, between child. It's just go get your snack, babe, and go on your way.
Right.
And Costco makes it even easier because then they make these small little containers of hummus that I don't have to scoop it out.
Yeah, it's done.
It's done.
Well, and so like to your point, we're already doing this for other people. Like we're already setting other people up for success in so many ways. And so it's really just, you cannot pour from an empty pitcher and you have to do it for yourself too. You just have to.
We do.
And you deserve it.
We deserve it. And it's the greatest act of self-love, but it's also the greatest act of care for your family because we've always talked about when the primary caregiver of any family is well taken care of, is well rested, is happy, we both know that everything else runs better, runs more smoothly, always. And so it actually is, it's like this. When people choose not to care for themselves physically, so they're just someone who's like, I don't care, I'm going to die someday, I'm going to eat what I want to eat. Well, I don't like that attitude because ultimately someone is going to have to care for them because their body is going to fail.
Right.
And so we can think of it like, oh, it's not going to impact anybody. This is my body. I can eat what I want. It's not going to impact anybody. If I want to be unhealthy and on medications, that's up to me. Well,
Right.
ultimately, we all know that we have to answer to somebody. Somebody is going to be taking care of you.
That's
And
right.
so it is a great act of love to those in our life to care for ourselves, even as caregivers, because someday somebody's going to be caring for us too.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's start early. That's what I say. Let's start early.
Well, and you can really, so let's start talking about the results that people are getting, your clients are getting, because you can change the trajectory of
Mhm.
your own health outcomes. Like you can eliminate, not manage, but eliminate chronic disease.
Mhm. Absolutely. So, yeah, let's talk about outcomes a little bit. There are, I mean, we could do a whole episode on just like wonderful stories of hope because there really are so many of them. But here's a couple of big ones. Okay. First of all, 80% of whether or not people are going to have a disease or not, chronic illness or not, 80 plus now percent is all lifestyle.
Oh my gosh.
All lifestyle. So that's, do you get up and exercise? Do you get enough sleep? Do you eat well? Okay. All of those things. 80 plus percent. Genetics only play less than 10% of a role in whether or not we're going to be, dealt with an illness of some sort as we go through life.
Wow.
Less than 10%. They're saying even less than that now. So even genetics, there's now a subfield called epigenetics,
Mm-hmm.
okay, which is the study of how the genes in our body express. So we know now that you can have a set of identical twins, same DNA.
Mm-hmm.
One gets cancer, one does not. Why? It's completely epigenetic. It is, they look at those genes and can say, well, we'll use Michelle versus Kate. Michelle, she was very active in her life. She was an athlete. She was very conscientious about what she ate and she worked out. Her stress was low, etc. Kate, however, she was kind of a nervous Nelly a lot of her life.
Mm-hmm.
She ate a lot of her feelings, and that's what it is. Okay. And these are the differences. And oh, by the way, she was a smoker.
Mm.
Okay. We look at smoking as like, oh yeah, well, of course you're going to get cancer if you smoke versus that you don't, but it's not that. Epigenetics, the environment in which we live our life, plays an enormous role in what's to come. So we know now that cancer is completely preventable. It's a lifestyle disease. We know that now.
Wow.
Yet 1 in 3 of us is going to have it. And so it comes back to being on us. So these positive stories of hope, of people's lives being completely changed. I'll tell you the most recent one. I had a gentleman who I worked with over the course of the last 3 months, whose wife called me because he was suffering from chronic pancreatitis.
Okay.
Okay, so that's essentially an infection of the pancreas.
Sounds really awful and
Horrible
painful.
stomach pains. Okay, this gentleman is barely 50. Okay, otherwise very healthy, not overweight, active guy, but just in the last year started to get chronic pancreatitis. It kept reoccurring.
Mm.
And his doctors were a little baffled by it. And he was on some medication, but it just kept coming back and he didn't like how he was feeling. So his wife, whom I had met at a different event, called me and said, hey, could you work with him? Yes, of course. Well, chronic pancreatitis is actually a liver issue, first and foremost.
Mm.
So we spent the last 3 months healing his liver, changing his diet, because his diet, although he didn't eat poorly, what he ate wasn't helping and already compromised pancreas. Okay. So we changed that. I taught him how he needs to eat in order to keep the inflammation down, to avoid other flares. And he's not had not a single flare since we began working together.
Oh my
And not
God.
only that, but he's yes, he's slimmed down, he's lost a little weight, but he's happier. He said,
Yeah.
Kate, I never felt this good in my life. I actually feel really good. Because we didn't just look at the pancreatitis, like that was a big part of it, right? But in dealing with his liver and taking care of his liver, so the liver is our fountain of youth.
Mhm.
All liver health is the fountain of youth. Okay, we don't often talk about it, but the liver is the body's filter for everything. And it takes a beating over time,
Right.
beating because we just, whether we're in college and we don't care and we drink a lot of drinks or
Mhm.
really high fat foods, or we have a lot of stress and adrenaline, old medications, it filters everything. Okay. And so at some point it starts to get sluggish and slows down and doesn't work as effectively. Okay. It's like an air filter. If we never clean it, it's going to get
Right.
clogged. Okay. So this man who has, 2 middle school aged children, who he's now able to live without fear, because he would get fearful every time he would eat a meal that he would be doubled over in pain. And he had just normalized it. And so many people, that's my question, Michelle, and this is the question I ask to my clients on every day is, how long have you lived with this?
Mm.
How long have you lived with this unnecessarily? Because so many of us are just living in pain
Right.
because we don't think that there's any other way. And my message to you and to everyone else is that there is always another way. It's whether or not we're willing to be disciplined, because it takes longer for it to last. Because it's like medication, food is medicine, is you got to do it daily. Like if you have your pill, if I have my Synthroid pill, I have to take it every day.
Right. Yeah,
I couldn't
absolutely.
take it once a week and think I'm going to get any benefit from it. Right.
Right.
Same thing. So, that's just one story. I've had people come off of anti-anxiety and depression medications by using food as medicine, getting
I was
off.
going to ask you that next.
Mhm. Mental
Yeah.
health is a huge, huge piece of this and can be managed the most effectively with nutrition and some key supplements. But I don't like to use the word because everyone rolls their eyes at supplements, and there's a place for certain ones, but there's
Right.
also a lot of not so good ones out there too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the whole conversation just feels like a beacon of hope that if someone is feeling run down or not feeling well or not feeling themselves, that it's worth them continuing to explore.
Mhm. Exactly. And with a note of caution, what I will tell you this is that when I began this, I was a slave to the internet. I took a few wrong turns,
Mhm.
took a left turn and tried things that sounded right. And there's a lot of trendy things out there. There are. And there's also a lot of bad advice too.
Right.
So what I would do is either contact your physician, a doctor, contact a trusted alternative practitioners. So there are acupuncturists, there are chiropractors, there are naturopaths, there are people like me, nutritionists, that
Mhm.
look through different lenses of how the body can heal. Contact someone like that for a second opinion too. It's always a great place to start. And then you can feel either more confident in your way forward. But I will say this, if whomever you see doesn't ask you about your nutrition, they're missing an enormous piece of your pie, because it's going to likely have to be modified in some way if you've been living with something chronic in order for you to have a different outcome on the other side. So
And
that's
that feels
okay.
pretty consistent that physicians don't ask about that.
They
They
don't.
want
It's
to know
just
what
not their
medicines you're
training.
taking,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
It's
they're
just
not
not their
asking.
training. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I was just watching a TED Talk last night, and the gentleman said, to this day, we are not talking about nutrition in med school. which boggles my brain.
Mhm. That's another topic for another day, Michelle.
Yeah.
It really is. But it is sad because, and especially, let's talk a minute about those who we're caring for,
Right.
our aging family members and friends. Okay. We're not talking about prevention anymore because we think, oh, they're older and we can't prevent anything. It is never, ever too late to change, ever. So if, here's a good example of someone, and she's actually still in process, but she came to me because her husband was showing signs of early onset dementia. She's very
Wow.
concerned. And she had heard through somebody else that maybe there was something that we could do to help him. I said, there is. I mean, I can't guarantee this, but one of the aspects of dementia or memory issues in general is toxicity in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to remove toxins from the brain. And when we begin to do that, the neural pathways in the brain can function and send electrical impulses more effectively. Okay. So I gave her a couple of suggestions of things that she could do. And the last I have heard, and I will be honest, I have not spoken to her in about 4 weeks now, but he was finding things easier, like not losing his keys as often, things like that. So
Yeah.
we don't know the power of the body, the malleability, especially of the brain. We talk about aging health. But
Right.
we do know that when the brain begins to age, that something's causing the aging. Oxidation is causing aging. That's what causes aging in the body. So if we can, and what oxidizes in the body? Metals. Okay. There's a lot of oxidation, a lot of free radicals in the body. So this individual, she said, I'm just going to do this kind of for the rest. We'll see how long it goes. And I said, the longer you do it, the more substantial the changes will be. But you can't expect miracles overnight. It's going to take multiple months. Give it 6 months. And that's the difference, is that using food as medicine is a process. Right. And oftentimes you can get relief very quickly. Some symptoms can go away really quickly. But for things like Alzheimer's, dementia, memory, mental health, it can take multiple months. And I say 6 months to 2 years of consistency. And so sometimes people say, I don't want to wait that long. Okay. Pick your hard.
Right.
That's,
hard.
This is hard to make some lifestyle changes. It is. It is hard to get up and make this smoothie every single day, or it is hard to eat the blueberries every single day, or whatever it is for you. Okay. It is hard because it's new. It's different. It's not your normal. But what the alternative is actually far harder. Okay. Suffering the heart attack, suffering from the memory loss. Right. The 10 plus medications you're on for the blood pressure and the cholesterol and whatnot, that's harder. So we ultimately are always going to have to pay in some way, right? Like that's life. And I say, pay for your health in the currency of food first. And save on all the medical bills down the road, save on the medications, so there is great hope. And this young man, or this not, he's a young man, he's in his 50s, that's young, right? Yeah. But to not be losing his keys all the time, that's improved his life. So hopefully he'll continue on and continue to see good healing there.
I love that. Well, I mean, as we wrap up, I think something that I'm thinking right now is that when you start down this path, you are not going to have the same energy that you have right now. So while it might feel harder and more exhausting at first, you literally and physically and emotionally and mentally lighten up as you go. So it's not going to take the same energy and bandwidth. And like you were saying about practicing and in your protocols, so don't think that you're going to be slogging through the whole time. I think
that is such a good point. It's
Yeah,
exactly
like
right.
it all gets easier and better and better.
Mhm.
And it eventually isn't as hard. Like when you were like a little baby kid, you didn't know how to brush your teeth, right?
Mhm.
Or walk, and you
Right.
fell a lot, and you had to just keep practicing, and then you can do these things without even thinking about it. And I get the sense that that is where we end up with this too, with through working with you, and it does get easier.
They're habits, you know,
Yeah.
they're new habits that, the simplest thing, if I told your listeners to do one thing different, it's to wake up tomorrow morning and drink a glass of lemon water the first thing in the morning. That can become your new habit. When you do that, you alkalize your body, you detox your liver, it's hydrating. If you just did that one thing, you prove to yourself, I can change.
Wow.
That's it.
That's such a great takeaway. Well, I was going to ask you for what's one last thing you want people to take away. Is there anything else that you think you're feeling compelled that maybe somebody needs to hear? Do you feel like we covered it?
Yeah, I think we covered it. I mean, the only nugget I will say is this, is that if you or someone you love has been given a diagnosis, know that it is only a diagnosis. It is a label.
Mm,
And it doesn't mean that it's your label forever. It's your current state. And that there is ways to heal
mhm,
if you're willing to try. And especially under the notion of autoimmune, when we say the body's attacking itself, the body is not attacking itself, the body's attacking an invader,
mm.
something that's not supposed to be there. Don't ever give up on your body. It doesn't fail you. It will never fail you, right? That's my takeaway, is for people to trust in their bodies again,
Mhm.
and to take back the ownership and the power to be able to, drive the bus. You are the bus driver. Don't let someone else drive it for you.
I love that.
Mhm.
How do we spell Quell, and how do people get a hold of you?
Quell is Quelle. So you can Google quellhealth.com.
Okay.
You can email me, kate@quellhealth.com. That's the easiest one. You can go onto my website, quellhealth.com, and you could click on the link that says schedule a health clarity, and we can have a phone call. No
Beautiful.
charge. It's just as a phone call together. And I can share a bit about my practice and what we do, and you can share about what you have going on too.
That's perfect. Well,
Mhm.
thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you, Michelle.
I feel really confident that somebody's walking away thinking a little bit differently.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
so. It's really is. I mean, talk about a month of hope, of waiting.
Yes.
It's here for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, everybody.